Where do you think compliance stands or should be standing and thinking about as of today?
I did write about this when I think I woke up around 3 a.m. Wednesday morning, and I had already sensed that Trump was probably going to pull this off. Sure enough, he did, and typed out some initial thoughts. And I've spent most of the week talking to compliance officers here and there about what they think. And I wanted to cover, I think, three big points that jump out to me right away. First, I have not done an official poll on this, but I suspect most compliance officers are dismayed that Donald Trump is in charge for multiple reasons. But more than anything else, I think a lot of people were just dispirited because we should acknowledge that Donald Trump is not a good man. He is venal in the sort of moral sense. I personally think he's pretty stupid and not that, just doesn't grasp a lot of nuances of complex issues. He is a lawbreaker. He's been accused of violating the FCPA. He is a convicted felon. He has been found liable for sexual assault. And a lot of people are just wondering, how are we supposed to support an ethics and compliance culture when that man is at the top of our society? And voters put him in, which they did. So are they really saying that they don't care about ethics and compliance and good conduct in the same way that Trump clearly does not care about ethics and compliance? There was this existential angst. And that's the thing I wanted to talk about first. There was one person, a senior audit executive at a company, and he said this to me. I'll read out his comment. Here's what I think about what the average American thinks about compliance. They don't care. They don't care how corporations are run. They don't care that corporate executives are dishonest. They don't care about business rules. They think how Trump runs his business. Think about Musk as a corporate leader. That's our future. Now, with all due respect to my internal audit guy, I disagree with him, where he says people don't care about ethics and compliance. I think it is more the case that people grumble about the need for ethics and compliance, and they say they don't like it right up until the thing happens, whether that is your boss harassing you, or your 401k got wiped out because of accounting fraud, or any number of other things might happen. You don't have a hospital procedure because the hospital fell victim to a ransomware attack and had to reschedule its procedures for 6 weeks. People tend to care about compliance and ethics then. They're always asking, how the F did this happen? I was there in 2008 when the economy crashed. A lot of people cared about ethics then. So really, I think that my friend is conflating why people voted for Donald Trump with whom he is. And maybe that involves some political analysis and social analysis that is beyond the scope of everything compliance. But I personally don't think that people looked at Donald Trump, the person, and said, that's the guy I want to emulate. That's who I think is great. And he is a good, noble Christian, and I want to follow him. They looked around and said, my life sucks. I don't like the system. Harris is part of the system. So I'm going to vote against the system. And I guess that means Trump. But because I think that his venality is incidental to his victory, not a driving force to it. And honestly, at the end of the day, companies are still going to do lots of bad things, and people are still going to complain about it and still demand that companies shouldn't have done those things. And I don't know exactly what it'll mean for regulatory enforcement, although I'll get to a second point on that in a moment. But people still will want to feel like they have some measure of recourse when they are aggrieved. And if there's anything Americans are good at, it's feeling aggrieved. So I just want to say that for the existentialist angst here, why are we even doing this? Because despite what people did 2 or 3 days ago, they actually do want to work at ethical companies. They do like obeying the law. They don't like lawbreakers. For whatever reason, a majority of them decided the exigencies of the moment necessitate that we put a lawbreaker and a venal person into office anyways. We can talk about that some other time. But the existential angst, I'm not there on it. Conversation number two I had was a bit more specific with a compliance officer, where I asked this person, what about FCPA enforcement? Because it's no secret, Donald Trump does not like the FCPA. As I've said before, he is suspected of violating the FCPA when he built a hotel in Azerbaijan back 10 or 15 years ago. He has promised before that he would want to do a big number on the FCPA. He never did. Neither did the Republicans in Congress. I don't know that they're actually going to try that again. But all of that said, when I asked this compliance officer, what do you think about FCPA enforcement? His response was, and again, I'll quote you because I have another post going up about this in a few minutes. Oh, I don't think the FCPA is going away. And even if it did, it's not like my company could forget about the FCPA compliance anyways. Okay, why did he say that? And I think he touched on three good things. A, the FCPA is a moneymaker for the federal government. They like making that money. They like the revenue that it can bring in. The Justice Department itself, the prosecutors there, they like having FCPA as a career track. How many of them come in from the private sector or they come up as an AUSA, they become a federal prosecutor for a while, then they go to the private sector, they bill out 2,500 an hour to help you with an FCPA investigation. I'm not saying that this is a racket. That's not what I mean, because I think fighting corruption is a good thing. But still, there is a lot of incentive for the Justice Department to keep doing this. I am no fool. I am not naive. I do realize that there occasionally will be CEOs who say, I don't care that we got the FCPA thing. I'm just going to give Trump 5 million to the charity of his choice, charity, quote unquote. And then he's going to make that case go away. Is that going to happen? Yeah, probably. Is it gonna happen at scale? I don't think so. I don't think Trump is interested enough in that. So I think that Trump will have episodes of corruption in his government and probably within his office. But as I said before, I don't think that his corruption is going to be scalable and sustainable like that, frankly, because I don't think he's going to be that interested in it. If he could make a couple of bucks by doing this, sure. But don't forget, this man is 78. He's not in good health. He spends most of his day watching TV. I don't think he's gonna be that invested in trying to gut the FCPA. He's gonna be invested in saying it and in saying a lot of things, but I don't know that he's going to be that invested in the doing of it. A lot of people will still be invested in having a viable FCPA enforcement program, possibly even including Trump, so he can open investigations about people he doesn't like or who don't give him the big shakedown, graft, and kickbacks. And then the last point about FCPA, my compliance officer who talked about all this, he is a British company with a large US presence, but they also do business around the world. It's like, I got the UK Bribery Act. I got other anti corruption statutes. I take government contracts. There is no way I can just dismantle my internal controls for anti corruption, regardless of what Trump and his Justice Department minions may or may not do about FCPA enforcement. I need to have these capabilities in place. And my CEO and my general counsel do know that. And I think that was a very good point. Last big thing that I'll say, the last conversation I had with the compliance officer, we were questioning what is the role of Elon Musk in this future administration? Because Musk had said that he's going to be in charge of some department of governmental efficiency. There's a certain richness that to be more efficient, the first thing we're going to do is create new bureaucracy. But okay, whatever. Let's assume that he does that. And then he is going to march around the federal government, gutting personnel, gutting programs, gutting spending. And has anybody given any thought to all the other Trump loyalists who are going to be around who actually want a job too? Because here's an example of what I mean. Let's look at the Securities and Exchange Commission. One leading person to potentially be a chairman under Trump is Dan Gallagher, former Republican commissioner during the Obama years, these days, chief legal and compliance officer at Robinhood. I've known Gallagher for 10 years, not well, but he and I have exchanged emails and comments. Good guy, thoughtful guy, reasonable Republican SEC chair as these things go. And he's going to take that job and then try and run the SEC while Elon Musk mucks around in his organization and says, I'm going to cut 3/4 of your staff. And how is that going to work? And I think that we should remember the hallmarks of the first Trump administration were chaos and incoherence more than fascism. I suspect we're going to see a lot of that again. And just because they might be better at knowing what they want to do, it doesn't mean that they're any smarter or more skilled in the doing of it. These are people led by someone who is not terribly engaged, not very energetic, and not very smart. And I think that is going to be a reflection of a lot of dysfunction in this administration. So when we wonder, what is the SEC going to do? What, say you're in healthcare, what is Robert Kennedy Jr. going to do with healthcare reform? And he's going to try and gut the FDA or do this, that, or the other thing. How is the Department of Health and Human Services secretary going to feel about that? Maybe he will actually be HHS secretary. I don't know. But we are going to have a cast of characters who are parading around the government, trying to do this, that, and the other thing, and interfering with people doing their real job. And even if you disagree with them doing their real job, the chaos is still going to be the defining characteristic. And that is going to be a point compliance officers should think about, because when the SC is burning down around its ears, thanks to Musk in feuds with Gallagher or whoever or what's going on, those are the people at the other end of the phone when you have an incident you're trying to resolve. So we wonder a lot about how is that going to work over the next 4 years. That's me on my soapbox. I will now get off and let other people do their thing.
Mr. Marks, you're off first.
So basically, we're using tone from the top as a punchline now, because if that's kind of what this is going to turn into, then I'm just curious as to how it all eventually does play out. I mean, everything that you said certainly resonates with me. I understand it, but, and I realize that most companies live in a global type of environment, because of the way supply chains work and things like that. And that makes perfect sense to me. But if I'm looking at the leader in chief of the free world here, and I'm doing something and I realize that I'm really dealing with someone that really just doesn't care about any of this, because they're riddled with behavior that is indicative of overriding, circumventing, or ignoring types of rules, regulations, or controls, then I'm going to guarantee that's got to trickle down through the rest of the structure and the rest of the attitudes that people will have. And so I think it's a pretty dangerous proposition, Matt. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because to me, I mean, I do think now tell it from the top is just, it really is just a punchline.
I mean, it certainly is a punchline in the Trump administration, as it was the first time around, and it will be again. But I still do fundamentally think that, most people actually do want to be ethical and play by the rules, including most CEOs who are at the top. I think of it this way, is that the best sales executives I know, they despise the idea of cheating or bribing to win a business contract, because that implies that they are not good enough to vanquish their competitors in fair contest. And they take exceptional offense when I say you're just going to bribe your way to do it. Now, there are executives there who might feel they have no choice and I'm going to have to do this. That's a fault of senior management for not giving you the room to have more choices. There are also a handful of executives I've seen who actually they say, "No, I got no problem with bribing people and fixing contracts. I think that's fine." And Tom, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
No.
All right, then these people who behave like that way, we all know them, and universally, they're a-holes, and nobody likes them at the end of the day. And most times, I've seen them all get hoist on their own petard when they get run off on some other sort of fraud that blows up in their face. But we have to remember that Trump is one of those executives, but most people do think he is an unpleasant character. He never had favorable approval ratings when he was president. I don't suspect he's going to have them now. Why would he have them now? Because every other elected official who was ousted an incumbent this year, whether that is Keir Starmer and Mr. Armstrong, you can chime in, but everybody else, they all get into office and then they all get unpopular too. So why is Trump going to be any different? He wasn't popular the first time. There's a lot of big factors and influences at play that means he's probably not going to be popular now. And I think that's just reflective of people who are a-holes ultimately aren't that popular. And I don't know that I have a better answer for you right now, Jonathan Marks. I'll think about it more, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, I guess the other thing that I keep thinking about is that we've worked so hard, many of us, to make sure that we've implemented at least fundamental frameworks and sound governance principles and controls and things like that over the years. I would hate for a board or some board that kind of gloms onto all this thinking that we can now relax a little bit. You can't relax a little bit.
Mhm.
You can't. You have to keep you have to keep your foot down. There has to be forward momentum. It just can't be momentum for the
Well,
sake of momentum. And
it,
that's my bigger fear.
it's a question of what is the risk tolerance the company wants to take and how much do they want to take their foot off the board or off the pedal. Like, I think artificial intelligence would be a great one, a great example here. You want to go in and embrace AI without any sound governance at all, knock yourself out. I'm willing to bet it's going to blow up in your face. You want to go into global business without any internal accounting controls. I suppose maybe we can't stop you anymore, and Trump wouldn't see that there's anything wrong with that. Neither did Bernie Ebers at WorldCom. Where is WorldCom now? Where did Bernie Ebers go? Prison. Like, these relaxations, you can have some recalibration of risk tolerance, but that is not the same as saying, F it, man, I can just have all the risk I want. Sooner or later, then the inevitable will eventually happen. And I think that's case in point. And I do actually think that when Donald Trump comes into office, I think his administration is going to be terrible because he doesn't know what he wants to do. He doesn't really care what he wants to do, and his plans are incoherent. And I think most people who voted for him are in for a rude awakening. And then, like, much like the first term, which turned out to be in the end a disaster. And you're like, folks, what do you think's going to happen now?
And I think from a regulatory point of view as well, there's no sense in relaxing your controls on the basis of now. Investigations are never real time. I'm doing one at the moment. It's conduct in 2018, 2019. That's relatively quick. Oftentimes you're investigating conduct 7, 8, 9 years ago, particularly if it's with the authorities. I think it was probably about podcast 15 when Tom said compliance is always viewed in the rear view mirror. And I think that's definitely right. You're dumb if you bet on the current administration, even if Trump turns out to be the best president ever. He's only going to do one term unless he alters those rules as well. People like Elon Musk, though, are they one-night stands or marriages? When you've got two egotists in the same room, neither of them get to talk about their favorite topic exclusively. So they're not going to last very long together, are they? And a lot of these recent converts to Trumpism, they sort of obviously never happened to me, but the last available person at the last dance of the school disco.
I do think that Elon is too mercurial of a person to last very long with Donald Trump. And not only that, but he clearly wants to take over the world. He's already done this now. He's going to move on to other things too. Do they like the idea of sitting around and barking orders and then things magically happen? Sure. But, the hard work of actually doing policy development and administration, Trump doesn't want to do that. He didn't do it before. Musk doesn't want to do that. He's never done it. He acquired Twitter, ran it into the toilet. When Tesla finally ran into some really difficult problems a few years ago, he never had a good idea for it. And remember, he did not found Tesla. He did not start PayPal. He did not start Twitter. All of these businesses he blew in. Occasionally he was lucky and he made a killing. That's why he is the richest man in the world. But fundamentally, he's a reckless person. And ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a falling out between Trump and Musk, because to your point, Jonathan, when you have two egoists in the room, they can't talk about their favorite subject.